And here we go. In the year 1806, I was drafted with many of my comrades into military service in the conscription at that time and was assigned to the regiment of Romig. In the fall, I traveled with the regiment to Prussia in the campaign which Emperor Napoleon, with the princes, then his allies, was conducting at that time against Prussia. And this is interesting because I've talked about on this podcast before the Battle of Jena and what happened at the Battle of Jena. And what happened at the Battle of Jena is that the Prussian army was defeated pretty savagely by Napoleon's army, and that made them make some major adjustments to the way they ran things, and that was kind of the beginning of decentralized command from the German perspective. But this guy, Jacob Walter, was actually there. Now, this is what's interesting, and I go take some time to paint this picture of the way these soldiers operated back then. First of all, they marched just about everywhere. And sometimes they'd ride horses, but most of the times they marched. And when they marched, what they would do is just wherever they were, whatever village they were in, they would go in and get quarters in that village. They'd go in, hey, we're here. We need to stay in your house. And we need to get fed. And that's what they did. And people allowed them to do it. I mean, bunch of people with guns show up at your house and say, we want food and beds. You know, these people gave them what they wanted. Sometimes willingly, depending when they were traveling out of their own country. So when they were in Germany or in their Westphalia, the locals, as they were leaving, the locals would give them, hey, we'll support you. It's like, military guy, we'll support you. And then when they got into enemy territory, they would have to be more forceful. But here's how it starts off with him marching. We were given good quarters everywhere, which kept me always healthy and cheerful in spite of the continuous marching. Furthermore, I was only 19 years old, a fact which caused me frequently to participate in thoughtless and dangerous enterprises. I think he was getting after it as a young 19-year-old. And this is another thing that's interesting. So this guy, these conscripts, they weren't permanent soldiers. They were more like reservists, where they would go and fight, and when the war was over, they'd go back home and continue with whatever their job was. And so that's what happens to him. He, gets tasked. He's only 19 years old. Boom, you're going to go fight. He says, okay, starts going and marching. Back to the book. In this city, it happened in my quarter that a comrade wanted to force the landlord to sing. However, he refused to do so, sitting the whole night on a bench near the stove, weeping. Since this man could not sing because of his sorrow, Soldier Hummel wanted to frighten him, took his rifle, cocked the hammer, and shot. The bullet passed by me and another soldier and lodged in the wall. I wanted to mention this in order to show how the soldiers were running wild at that time. So, like I said, when they were in their own country, they'd get good support and everyone would take care of them, but then the further they got into other countries, they had to use force.